Good morning, children. Welcome to your English class. Today, in this section, we are going to discuss a poem from your English Junction textbook. A poem for you written by Jim Moriarty. Let's check the background of the poem. Do you like Sherlock Holmes stories? And do you know who is Sherlock Holmes? Yes, he is a fictional detective character created by Arthur Conan Doyle. Jim Moriarty is also a character and criminal mastermind created by Arthur Conan Doyle. And there is one more character in the detective stories of Sherlock Holmes. That is Dr. John Watson, Sherlock Holmes' friend and assistant. Before discussing the poem, let's know the background behind it. This poem is written from the point of view of Professor James Moriarty. We already discussed that Professor James Moriarty is a master criminal created by Arthur Conan Doyle and the greatest enemy of Sherlock Holmes. We know that who is Sherlock Holmes. He is a fictional detective character, and I know that you have already read the detective stories of Sherlock Holmes. In this poem, the speaker is referring to events that take place in the short story, The Final Problem. So, The Final Problem is a short story written by Arthur Conan Doyle. It is a detective short story, and our poem is referring to events that take place in the short story, The Final Problem. In the story, The Final Problem, Sherlock Holmes is alone near Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland. It's a waterfall and it is in Switzerland. Dr. Watson is tricked by Moriarty into going back to the hotel. By the time Watson realizes that it is a trick and arrives at the waterfalls, and he finds only some muddy footprints. That means Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty was not there. Watson can find out only some muddy footprints. It is assumed that both Holmes and Moriarty fought and then fell into the waterfall. However, in the story, The Adventures of the Empty House, it is found that Sherlock Holmes survived the struggle. In this particular poem, a poem for you, the speaker is Jim Moriarty, and the speaker imagines that Moriarty too survived the struggle and is writing to Holmes to challenge him. Okay, children, let's look into the poem. A poem for you. Roses are red, violets are blue. Dear me, Mr. Holmes, what happened to you? In the beginning of the poem, the poet is saying that everything in the nature remains unchanged. Still, the roses are red in color and the violets are in blue color. And the poet is asking to Mr. Holmes, what happened to you? Dear Mr. Holmes, what happened to you? So in the first stanza, first 4 lines, the poet is saying that everything in the nature remains unchanged. And Mr. Holmes, what happened to you? Something happened to Mr. Holmes. And the poet is asking Mr. Holmes, what happened to you? Deserting your friends and taking your life, you have made quite a mess and caused quite a strife. And your little friend John, what about him? Without you, his life looks quite grim. In the next few lines, Jim Marathi says that Sherlock Holmes has deserted his friends. Deserted means leaving away, alone. Sherlock Holmes has deserted his friends, leaving the friends and never coming back. That is called deserting friends. And his life was taken by himself. He has taken his life from himself and he created a mess. Mess means a confused situation in the mind of his friends. So, Marathi says that Holmes has deserted his friends and also he has taken his life by himself. He killed himself and he created a mess, a confused situation in the mind of his friends which caused a trouble in them. That caused quite a strife. Strife means trouble or disagreement. So in these lines, you can understand that Marathi says that Holmes has committed a suicide or he killed himself and that has created a problem in the mind of his friends. And he has deserted his friends. He had left the friends and he created a confused situation, a mess in the mind of his friends, and which caused a trouble, which caused some strife in the mind of his friends. Okay. And your little friend John. Here, Mr. Marathi is mentioning the friend of Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, Dr. John Watson. And your little friend Dr. John Watson, and what about him? Without Sherlock Holmes, his life looks quite grim. Grim means worrying or bad. So without Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson's life become a grim. Life become worrying or bad. Dr. Watson's life become grim without Sherlock Holmes. So in these lines, you can understand that Mr. Marathi is saying that when Sherlock Holmes committed suicide or Sherlock Holmes killed himself, his friends were deserted and also his best friend Dr. John Watson also become very worrying situation. He was in very bad situation. Without Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson's life looks quite a grim. Okay. So think very hard before you return. Not everyone can handle that kind of burn. So here, Mr. Marathi is telling Sherlock Holmes that before you return, you have to think very hard because everyone cannot handle that kind of burn that you created in the mind of your friends. So, Mr. Marathi is giving a warning to Sherlock Holmes that when you are returning, you have to think very hard because everyone, your friends, cannot handle that situation, that kind of burn. Burn means disrespect for someone. The disrespect you have created in the mind of your friends, everyone cannot handle that. So whenever you want to return, you have to think very hard. Dear me, Mr. Holmes, does my name ring a bell? That day you faked your death. I faked mine as well. So in the last few lines, Mr. Marathi is saying that, Dear Mr. Holmes, does my name ring a bell? Ring a bell means to cause someone to remember something. My name, here my name means Mr. Marathi's names had created someone to remember something. And that day, the same day, you faked your death. When Sherlock Holmes pretended to die, Sherlock Holmes pretended that he is going to die. The same day Mr. Moratti also faked mine as well. So, here in the last few lines, you can understand that Mr. Moratti also faked his death, like Sherlock Holmes. So, here Mr. Moratti is saying that, does my name ring a bell? Does Mr. Moratti's name cause someone to remember something? The same day Sherlock Holmes faked his death, pretended his death, Mr. Moratti also faked his death. So, Mr. Moratti feels that the shock of Holmes' survival will be too much for some people. He also means that they will feel disrespected because they did not know of Holmes' plan and grieved for no reason. Holmes had faked his death as well. Okay, my dear children, that's all for today's section. Read the poem 3 times with utmost care. Take care. Be safe. Bye. Thank you.